evening and welcome to COVID-19 Watch Forward Stronger. I am your host, Stephen Duncan, and as usual, I'm happy to have this opportunity to moderate these discussions and to direct your questions and concerns to our panelists. Today's topic is not one that we have often enough, or maybe not at all. It's on something that we take for granted, even though it empowers us to have a good quality of life, to make the most of our days, and to make life incredibly less labor intensive. Energy, specifically electric power. Energy really has been at the core of international politics and the global economy, and its evolution, or lack thereof, is of immense significance to the future of the world that we know. The future of electric power is also of importance to Belize, and so joining me tonight to dissect this dynamic topic are Mr. Peter Allen, CEO in the Ministry of Public Utilities. Welcome, Peter.
It's good to see you again, Steve, and good to be here with everybody.
We have Mr. Ambrose Tillett, the Electricity Director at the Public Utilities Commission. Welcome, Ambrose.
Thank you, Steve, and good night. And I'm quite honored to be with this top panel that you have here tonight.
And Mr. Jeffrey Locke, Managing Partner at L&L Business Solutions. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Steve. Good night to the general public. I'm happy to be here to share in this very important topic.
And we have Mr. Alan Sharp, who is an electrical engineer and the owner of Sharp Engineering Firm. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Steve, and good night to everybody. And I'm very pleased to be here to have this. Looking forward to this great discussion tonight.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to our viewers. Thank you to you, the panelists, for joining us tonight. And maybe we ought to get started by asking sort of general question to set the stage in terms of trying to get the public clear understanding of the sources of Belize, of electric power supply in Belize, no? So kind of set the stage for us and put it in context where we get our power supply from. And then we can maybe get off the ground after that in terms of asking more specific questions. I don't know, who'd like to take that, CEO or Ambrose?
Sure, I'll start off if you don't mind, Ambrose. And
Sure, no problem.
Obviously, you all know far more about the subject material, but just in general terms, I wanted to describe what the policy is for the government of Belize. We are somewhat blessed, of course, because my minister, Minister Frank Papa Mena, the Minister with responsibility for the public service, energy and public utilities, used to work for the Department of Energy as the Public Information Officer. I think when you were there, Ambrose, the Minister is himself very well versed in issues related to energy. And first of all, we at the Ministry want to make sure that we put in place policies and practices that make electrical energy available to all Belizeans. So our objective is universal access. You probably know, Steve, that the company Belize Electricity Limited does terribly well in this regard, but still there is a percentage of villagers who do not have access to energy. Now, that access we want to complement by making the electrical energy so inexpensive, of course. We want it to be reliable so that you can always count on that energy being available. We want it to be clean, and our country is branded as an environmentally friendly, clean country that is conscious of climate commitments. And of course, we want the energy to be sustainable in support of our national sustainable development objectives and of course those climate. In that context, we are blessed that some 60% of our grid is from renewable sources. And 60% of our grid, I would say that our grid is about 100 megawatts in size, and Ambrose and Alan and Jeffrey can correct me on any errors I make in this regard, but about 60% from renewable sources, with nearly 40% from hydro and about 20% from biomass from the sugar industries, and particularly Belcogen at Belize Sugar Industries and ASR, and also Santander. So the remaining 40% of the grid is largely brought over from Mexico. So just quickly then, my summary is we want universal access to inexpensive, reliable, clean and sustainable energy. We have 60% of that grid available from renewables, with about 40% hydro, 20% from biomass, and the remaining amount being imported from Mexico.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. So, Jeffrey, from your vantage point, having been in this business for such a long time, what would you say is probably the best mix? Best might be a strong word, but what would you say would be the best mix that we should try to strive for in Belize as it relates to the average cost of power coming out of those various supplies that CEO Allen spoke about?
Thanks, Steve. In general, the approach I've always encouraged is one of access to as much energy sources as possible.
Okay.
Right? So whenever we look at electricity in Belize, I don't look at Belize as an island. It's surrounded by other countries with other energy sources as well. So whilst we develop as much energy potential here in Belize, we should not limit it to just what can be developed in Belize. We should also make sure we have access to other energy sources. Not only access, but we also give access to our energy sources into those markets. So for me, it's one of more the merrier.
All right, but in terms of costs, Ambrose, in terms of cost, how do you, because there are times I hear as a layman listening to the news and stuff, it's as though Mexico is expensive, and then hydro might be cheaper, etc. So to Jeffrey's point, how far do you go with that cross-border mix?
Okay, the approach has been, and Jeffrey will correct me if I would say correct, but clarify if I don't say articulate enough. But there's always been this understanding between the Commission and BIA as to what would be the targets in terms of what the cost should be for wholesale power. And as a general target, the target was that if we can achieve wholesale prices in total of around 20 cents, when that is referred to the customer, that would be somewhere around 22.5 cents. Okay. That was the target. That has been the target. It continues to be the target we go towards. So we're always trying to strive. Currently, that number is somewhere around 26 cents customer. So it's higher than we're comfortable or the target that we want. Now, the mix is important.
That's what I thought.
As Jeffrey said, because you need to make sure you have a mix that is able to allow for some resiliency. We just went through 2 years of a drought. And if we ever needed to understand the importance of having resilience, it's the last 2 years. When hydro production was off in 2019 by somewhere around 30%, not off, 30% of what is normal was what was produced from hydroelectricity in 2019.
All right.
When you see that kind of compression
Yes,
to 30%,
yes.
you know that you really need to diversify your mix.
Yes.
In 2019, we also had an unusually high wholesale cost from Mexico, much higher than we're used to seeing, because they had problems the same times we had problems. And so, as Jeff pointed out, yes, we have a cost target, but you can't, everything, costs and risks are two things you need to balance.
Yes,
and
yes,
so we
yes.
strive for a target, but we also need to strive to diversify in order to build risk into the system for resiliency.
Got you. Well, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, got you. I got
So
that.
the target is around 20 cents, right, Jeff?
Yes,
That is
but I
the
want to
target,
clarify that because I don't want the public to say what we should be paying 20 cents for electricity.
No.
Right? So 20 cents, when Ambrose talks about 20 cents and 22 cents, he's talking about the cost of electricity.
That's correct.
Then also know there's a cost of transportation of the electricity.
Yes.
That's the transmission and distribution lines that you see all around the country.
Absolutely.
The cost has normally been around 14 cents, 15 cents.
Yeah.
So if you have a cost of electricity, cost of the power itself at about 22 cents after you consider different factors like losses and some stability issues,
Right.
you'd be around 36 cents or so, right? So that is, so just for the public to understand, when Ambrose talk about cost, he's talking about the actual cost of the energy coming in.
Yes.
But because you have to transport it, there's an additional 14 to 15 cents you have to add to that.
Yeah, excellent.
That's typically the scenario. So I'm just trying to make sure that nobody's still run to PUC tomorrow saying, why is it that I'm paying so much at the target?
All right, got you.
And I also made sure that I said, Jeff, that the cost of wholesale power is a lot more than
Right.
our target is.
All right. Let me ask Alan. Alan, as it relates to COVID, though, what impact was there on electricity, on electrical power supply, etc.? Alan Sharp, my apologies. Alan, what impact was there, if any? I'm not sure that you guys had any challenges, no? I mean, I guess engineers still make money whether it's COVID or not COVID, no? So.
Well, I'm not sure about that when you're an engineer in the private sector. But generally, I would say that from the standpoints of the power industry, of the power plants, of the IPPs,
Yeah.
I don't think there was much of a challenge from a COVID standpoint, other than because all the electrical companies are considered essential services. So all the employees were able to go to work and be at work. I think the challenge would have, if there were any challenges, I think the challenges were more that the utility might have seen a big shift in the consumption. We saw obviously the big drop in commercial consumption and a big rise in the residential consumption.
Good point.
I think the supply of energy, and I think Jeff and Ambrose will have much more information on this, but supply of electricity locally, COVID didn't affect anything. I think from the Mexican side, I'm not sure if there was any differences there, but locally, I think there wasn't any major change from a COVID having an effect as far as the production. I can see it affecting consumption. So I'm sure over that month when we were all at home, April, I believe, that electricity consumption went all the way down, which will affect, as you know, and Ambrose can speak more to this, but in Belize, we have like a breadbasket, so to speak, and there's a cost overall that is there. We have so many light poles, we have so many lines that has to be paid for an annual basis. And so think about just a general cost of all the full infrastructure. Let's call it a number, 1,000. And if that's the cost of 1,000, what BL and the PUC have tried to do is take the cost, the guess at the amount, how much that costs, how much electricity will be consumed for the year, divide it into the 1,000, and then say, okay, it's so much per kilowatt hour.
Gotcha.
Obviously, if you consume less, it
shows
has
up
an
that
effect on the
calculation.
formula.
That's
So that's going to be interesting come the end of the year. And I'm sure the proposal right now that BL has in to the PUC, that can also be very interesting.
Yes.
When it comes to that.
Understandable. But
Can I add something with respect to the COVID
yes,
COVID issue?
go ahead, Ambrose.
Alan is quite right. Across the world, you see significant contraction in electricity demand. There was a time when I think a lot of people thought that elasticity in demand was very small in this sector until COVID came along.
Yeah.
And we realized that it can get elastic in this sector. It's not inelastic as we thought.
All right.
The drop in demand is more than 10%. Both demand and energy has been more than 10%. And as Alan pointed out, that's the overall aggregate. And as Alan pointed out, you also saw a shift in pattern, where commercial contraction was much, much deeper than that. And you saw a significant rise in the residential class.
That's correct.
So that's on the customer end. And I think before we started this, Jeffrey was also talking about the input side. But let me not steal his thunder, let him speak.
All right, good, yeah. But I want to ask Jeffrey, though, about regional integration. We talk about regional integration in so many things. Is there any attempt, and Jeff, I'm doing this, I'm now coming back to the point you made earlier in terms of we're not an island. So we have to have that degree of maybe cross-fertilization, for want of a better term, where you can support each other. Countries around you can support each other to make sure you have the resiliency in energy. So what are your thoughts on regional integration as it relates to energy supply?
Okay, I will tackle that, Steve, carrying on from where Ambrose left off on the COVID situation, because it adds into the regional discussion we're having.
Good.
You mentioned the issue of price elasticity, where typically supply and demand, as the demand drops, typically the cost drops because of the supply and demand issue.
Yeah.
Right? And because of our interconnection with Mexico, right, Ambrose talks about a 10% drop in demand in Belize, and there would have been a similar drop in demand in Mexico. Interestingly enough, for Belize, that resulted in significantly lower prices of energy. Even if you go to fuel, before we get back to electricity. Prices last year, June, right, for premium gasoline was 11 cents. $11.13 a gallon.
I wonder where you were living.
Right, $11.13 a gallon.
Yes.
This year, June, it was $8.23 a gallon.
Correct.
So that's a 26% drop between last year June and this year June.
Yes.
Just because of the issue of supply and demand.
Okay.
Right? If you look into the matter of electricity, and this is the regional integration part, we're connecting into Mexico currently. They're a part of that more international market when it comes to electricity. Electricity price for Mexico last year was 16.6 cents per kilowatt hour.
US?
US.
Good.
Right? This year, it's about, so last year, June, when I look at because those prices are published on the internet and so on. When I look at the prices on the internet this year, June, it was $5.3 cents. So from 16.5 cents, 16.6 cents, more or less, to 5.3 cents. That's a 68% drop in cost of electricity between last year, June, and this year, June.
Yeah.
So on the international side, because of the supply and demand issue, right? Those are the impact we are seeing right now, which is a benefit to Belize, both fuel prices and electricity prices as a result of COVID.
Yeah, but Jeff,
right?
isn't that more because of the cost of fuel than a benefit from a regional integration approach?
But again, it's both because
Okay.
if you look at it, fuel prices dropped by 26%.
Yes.
Electricity price dropped by
68.
68%.
Got you.
Understand me?
Got you.
So there are some other factors in that.
Yes.
And the biggest one is in energy sector, you have different technologies that are just simply cheaper than others.
All right.
Right? The nuclear, your hydro, you know what I mean? Those are just simply cheaper than anything to do with fuel. Also, though, that is the one that's elastic is the for the gas turbines, right? And earlier this year, some certain refineries were paying you to take their gas.
Yeah.
That's how cheap the gas was.
All right.
So yeah, so it's a combination of because how it works regionally, Steve, is that when the demand drops, then you use less of your expensive plants.
No, fair enough. I got you. Yeah.
So it's a combination of the cost of fuel, but also the usage of different technologies and cheaper technologies.
Good. See you, Alan. Self-sufficiency. We talk about self-sufficiency in everything else. What would self-sufficiency in power supply look like for Belize?
Well, thanks, Steve. The thing is that it's such an exciting area and there's such great potential for Belize, not only to be self-sufficient, but in fact to be a net exporter of energy to the region, as you say, as part of the regional integration model. But certainly the policies of the government are that we should become 90 or 95% self-sufficient within the next 10 years, and that we will have increased the share of renewables in the energy mix to 90 to 95% as well, including perhaps, and this might be a misnomer that the engineers can correct me, but including perhaps the increased use of gaseous fuels for power generation, as Jeffrey was just saying. But the mix is important, as Alan and Ambrose had said, and you'll notice that in the mix that we've described so far, 40% hydro, 20% biomass, and the rest from Mexico, we are not yet considering utility solar. And there is, I think, on the very near horizon, the opportunity for utility solar, as well as the very exciting prospect of gaseous fuels producing a significant percentage of our grid at the types of pricing that Jeffrey and Ambrose were referencing a short while ago. So I think self-sufficiency is on the horizon. Cheaper electricity is on the horizon. Clean, reliable, and sustainable access to the entire population is on the horizon. And the use of smart technologies helps to make all of these goals and objectives entirely realistic. The engineers, I must say, constantly impress me with their grasp of this increasingly complex situation, both at the PUC and the private sector, and of course BEL, do a remarkably good job. You know, Ambrose and Jeff, you can correct me, but I believe that we are perhaps number one or second only to Costa Rica, perhaps, in the green production of electrical energy in the region. Even in pricing, we are rather better than any other country in CARICOM, with the exception of Trinidad, and don't do too badly compared to other countries in the region, including, for example, areas like California, where I think the pricing is rather higher. But we do have a pretty good system. We do have enormous potential, and we do have plans to achieve that potential in the near future.
Excellent. All right, that sounds very good. All right. Well,
Can I add something to what Dr. Allen said? Um, Not only, even before COVID, there has been a revolution in energy markets. Over the last 10 years, the, the way we use energy, the fuel side, has shifted more and more away from liquid fuels towards gaseous fuels. And that is because the technological shift that is happening in the United States, where they're able to extract shale
okay.
from the rock
Yeah.
formation,
Fracking, no?
has significantly shifted the relative price of gas to liquids. And what Dr. Allen is saying is that Mexico is making the shift, and Belize, the minister had made a directive that Belize should also join in that shift.
All right.
What COVID has done is make that shift even more necessary because the price differential is widening.
Gotcha. All right. Gotcha. So it's actually accelerated it for us.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're going to take our first commercial break. And viewers, we want to break just for a few ads. When we return, we will continue our conversation and we will also be fielding questions from our viewers. So please stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to COVID-19 Watch, Forward Stronger. I am your host, Stephen Duncan, and I have been joined via video call by Mr. Peter Allen, CEO in the Ministry of Public Utilities, Mr. Ambrose Tillett, Electricity Director at the PUC, Mr. Jeffrey Locke, Managing Partner at L&L Business Solutions, and Mr. Alan Sharp, Electrical Engineer and Sharp Engineering. Gentlemen, I have a couple of questions here from social media, and I think maybe I could throw the first one to Alan. Sharp Engineering. It says, should citizens be incentivized or at least encouraged to integrate solar power generation at home? Maybe net power supply can be sold back to BEL's grid.
How long we have? This is a very complicated issue, a lot more complicated than people realize. So yes, first, the simple answer is yes, I think we need to get solar going and distributed generation going. I believe the PUC has to find a way, and that's the most difficult portion, to get that integration going. However, I must express that I don't agree with net metering, because in Belize, first of all, net metering, and the other panelists can help me, is being changed in other countries and other states because it's failing.
Okay.
The reason being that the utility, in this case BL, still has to put up their transformer and their lines for you outside the house, and you still want to be connected. That cost. So you have to find a way of handling that cost. So you can't be just trading back electricity and then only standing there and taking BL like standby, because somebody has to pay for that. So
Yes.
if Alan Sharp is net metering, but Stephen Duncan is not net metering, at the end of the year when they do the calculation, they'll have to raise electricity rates, and Stephen Duncan will be paying for Alan Sharp's connection.
I see.
So there has to be different, and there are different ways to do this. You can put in a capacity charge. You can do what they say, buy all, sell all situations. But it's a complicated thing. It's not as easy as it sounds, but yes, we do have to move very fast, I believe. PUC has a big challenge in front of them, but we have to move forward into having distributed generation where the regular client can put up his solar and sell back into the grid.
Yes, okay, I understand. But maybe I should have a follow-up on that question, probably with Ambrose from PUC. Would not an individual putting up a solar energy pose the same challenge that that Mr. Sharp mentioned? In fact, while it might be cheaper to you, BEL would still be forced to maintain its network, its infrastructure. And if you use less from BEL, certainly BEL will generate less money, even though the infrastructure will still cost the same amount to maintain. So doesn't it pose the same challenge that Alan mentioned in terms of net metering?
Steve Alan was spot on.
Yes.
And that is the challenge of integrating these variable renewables like solar.
Correct.
How do you allow people to self-generate a portion of their consumption, but at the same time, they impose costs on the system because they expect the utility to still give them reliable backup service.
Correct.
And they want that backup service for little or nothing. Of course, at the PUC, we recognize that that is something which, because one of our mandates is to ensure that each class of customer pay the fair cost of the service being given to them. And so Alan is right. In order for us to do that, we would actually have to create a new tariff class.
Yes.
Well, that is a reasonable expectation. And in fact, that is something that BL has indicated to us, that if we move to this kind of service, BL has made it clear that this would be another tariff class we need to create, which would be a different kind of tariff class structure and whatever.
Okay.
Because, in fact, this is not new. A lot of utilities around the world have what we call full service customers and partial service customers, and they have different tariff classes.
All right.
For the full service customer, you know what they would mean. Partial, it would be like somebody like that.
All right.
And so they are challenging with respect to the cost allocation, and there's also challenges in terms of the overall amount, the aggregate amount that the utility can absorb at certain points in the system.
Yes.
So you can't have too much variable renewable on a weak part of the system. And so these are all the things that need to be in place if you want to do it system-wide.
All right, got you.
The commission has looked at it. We started actually your expression of interest last year, and we have not completed the exercise.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really sure why we haven't completed it. I think Alan has put his finger on some of the reasons why.
Yeah, the complexity,
The complexity, and I think the commission probably feels, and I am not a commissioner, I'm a staff, they probably feel they need more resources in order to implement something like this on a system-wide basis.
Okay.
But it's a challenge, and it's not easy, and people think it's just something you snap your fingers and it happens. But it has technical issues, it has commercial and cost allocative issues, and
all right.
That's it. Yeah.
No, thanks, Ambrose. Jeff, is it the next question from the social media that I would want to put on the table? Is it practical to work our protected areas and unused vast land by installing solar and turbine farms to generate power?
Okay, Steve, I will take it from a conservative approach. Belize have so much unused land, right, that I don't see the reason to go into reserves, one. Two, Belize has done some studies over the last few years, right, where it looked to determine what is the most appropriate locations to install wind turbines, the more appropriate locations to install solar panels and so on.
Yeah.
And from my knowledge of those studies, there's no reason to use reserves, to go into any reserve to do that.
Gotcha.
Actually, none of the reserves were seen as an optimum location for it.
Yes.
Right. So for me, one of the things, coming back to the first question, though, Steve, is that customers throughout the world, because electricity is such a significant part of their cost, especially in Belize.
Yeah.
Belize energy represents a huge part of our bill, right?
Yes.
In other words, when you look at what you get paid today and what you have to pay for electricity bills, it's huge. So it's a major concern. So customers want to have a little bit more control over how they use it. They want to be able to be an active player to kind of control their destiny. So coming back to the issue of the of solar customers putting up their own generation on their own solar panels or so on, right? Ambrose hit the two things, which is coming up with the right pricing formula, right? And coming up with the right system design for it. And the system design, that's the more challenging one. To me, on the pricing formula, it's very simple. Have an access fee, so everybody pays for access to the grid because we want to have access, don't we? We don't want, if we have our own generation, to be able to come and take away their access. All of us as customers want access.
Yeah.
That's a service we are paying for. So work out a fee schedule that says to have access to this amount of energy that you need, this is your flat rate fee that you have to start from. And then allow everybody else to trade based on the technical constraints afterwards. Because throughout the world, energy trading is going to be the future. The direction where everybody's going is people want to be able to trade in energy.
Okay.
But customers want to have more control over their consumption and also control over if they can sell some energy into the grid. Because what we look at is the issue of technology. It's important to know how your bill is made up. Customers will want to see which appliances is consuming how much electricity, so they know to manage those things and so on.
Yeah.
So customers, generally speaking, want to be more actively involved in this thing and not just sit down and enjoy it.
All right, good. CEO?
Jeff,
Sorry.
Steve, can
Yeah,
I just
go
add
ahead,
one
Alan.
thing?
Yeah.
Just for our viewers to get a concept. Solar power sounds great, and it is great. It is one of the best of the renewables. However, you cannot, let's say your grid uses 100 megawatt. You can't put 100 megawatt of solar on the grid.
Got you.
The best countries in Europe, which are some of the leaders, have about somewhere around, I think 20% is like where they're reaching at peak before they start to make the grid become unstable. We spoke about having a grid that's good and it's reliable. You can't put too much solar on it without starting to suffer, unless, as Jeffrey mentioned at the beginning, unless we're connected to Mexico. Once we're connected to Mexico, which is a big basket, and we're only one crumb in that basket, we could put on all the solar we want. But that is, again, the PUC has that massive challenge on their hand.
All right. CEO Ellen, in terms of vision and policy moving forward, is there what do you say the vision of decarbonized future for Belize, moving away from all this carbon? We hear talk of electric cars, we hear talk of different things, solar. What is our plan or thinking around moving towards a decarbonized future for Belize?
Well, I think that's another really exciting topic, Steve. I'm glad you bring it up, because when we measure carbon emissions as part of our nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, perhaps the biggest contributor to those carbon emissions is the transportation sector. And the transportation sector is largely run of liquid fuels, as Ambrose was saying earlier, and as Jeffrey was saying, but they're also extremely expensive, and they also require an extraordinary amount of foreign exchange to import those fuels on a regular basis. because our grid is so green, because the Public Utilities Commission and the National Utility DEL have done a very good job at developing green sources of electrical energy. It's entirely possible for us to move towards electric mobility vehicles. So I know that under Jeffrey's tenure at BEL and increasingly now at BEL, pilot projects are underway to see how we can make electric vehicles and electric transportation less expensive by perhaps reducing tariff structures. And we're collecting data on the possibilities of moving towards electric public transportation, electric buses. And in the end, part of that interest in terms of reducing carbon emissions is driven both from a patriotic point of view to have the best possible environment for our country and our citizens, but also from a financial perspective in that it is possible for us to access credits and inexpensive financing once we can make sure that we are both meeting and exceeding our climate goals. So again, uniquely in the region, Belize is very well positioned to take advantage of our unique natural resources and the position that we have created in the energy sector.
All right. Would you, Jeffrey, would you say that our infrastructure is appropriate for the, what you might want to call the proliferation? I don't know, that might be a strong word, but for wider use of electric vehicles in Belize?
Okay, let me take that from two standpoints, right? On the local network, my assessment is it wouldn't be difficult for charging stations to be installed around the country.
Okay.
For electric vehicles. So the network, from my assessment, can handle that with some modifications and also with the proper design.
Yes.
The bigger issue still comes back to making sure the cost of power is stable and low, right? And to do that, that's where I've been speaking about the regional integration approach to that, where then if we could then have access to more stable pricing of electricity, then people can invest in electric vehicles. You don't want to invest in electric vehicles and the price of electricity keep bouncing all over the place, right? You want to make sure when you do that investment, you're a banker, you know you have to manage your risk. When you do that investment, it's in an environment where prices are stable. To make prices stable, the approach that I have been looking at, my company has been looking at, is to be able to have access to stable pricing from Mexico. You could have stable pricing from Mexico. Like I said, currently, the price from Mexico right now is just over 10 cents Belize, 5 cents US, right? As opposed to the target price that Ambrose spoke about of 22 cents.
Yes.
So you see how low it is compared to the target price right now.
Yes.
Issue is needing to make that stable. So to have contracts that will ensure the prices don't fluctuate from as low as 10 cents this year to what it was last year, which was like 30 cents. Yes. And so what I've been working on, what my company has been working on, is to identify energy sources from Mexico that can do that. Right. So actually, we just presented a proposal to BEL last week. All right. And to the PUC and to the ministry, where we believe that there's this company from Mexico by the name of De Acero, who has access to generation 5 times what BEL needs, right? And who, when I vetted their proposal and when I looked through their model, I believe that can provide that kind of stable pricing. And this might look like a big plug for my company. But at the same time, it's just part of the facts. Right. Also, once you get that stable supply, then you could reinforce the grid. You could make the transmission grid much more resilient and so much more stable to accept or to absorb all of these things that we want to add to it. We want to add solar. We want to add electric vehicles. So if you stabilize the grid more, right, then you have access to all of these wonderful things that are on the horizon.
Excellent. Alan Sharp, as a user in the private sector, what would you want to see the electric power industry in Belize look like in the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, as a consumer and and in the private sector, I think, I mean, yes, we do want that that we have lots of power sources in Belize, but I think electricity in general is so important to the development of Belize that we really have to focus on getting electricity rates down, especially for the producers and the industrial sector. Not that we don't want it for the residential as well, but for us to grow as a country and let the economy boom, so to speak. And as Jeffrey mentioned earlier and Ambrose, where the cost of electricity is a major cost to any business.
Okay.
So we would like to see that, to make sure that whatever we are doing, and I know PUC has been doing a great job at this, is to ensure that in the short and long term, that costs of electricity are maintained low. And in some of that, I must say that I would like to see some of the laws be modified to give the PUC more independence. I would like to see that they have more teeth to be able to control the sector, so that IPPs right now are still able to get a political representation in their arguments. And the argument should be purely technical and purely for the benefit of the citizens and the development of the country. We need to take away that some of that, there will always be, but we have to reduce it. And right now, I would like to see the laws adjusted. I think the last time the law was even touched for PUC was 2003 or something. The Electricity Act, I don't even remember the last time it was touched. And I think it's now time to plug some of the holes. We've learned a lot over the years, both PUC experience and BL experience. So overall is to, and Jeffrey mentioned this, from a consumer point of view and from a private sector point of view, we need it to be stable and predictable. We cannot be investing in a steel plant or a cement plant or something, and you don't know where the electricity will be in 5 years, because these are 20-year investments.
Yeah.
And this is high electricity consumption.
Okay.
And if you allow me one little thing here, Steve, Belize's future is in trying, we're one of the highest cost in labor in the region. Our future is in trying to go into more of the digital age, try to make things work more with robots, work more with these things, get our people technically sound, so that's what they're working at. But all of this is using electricity. So we need to get our electricity down for the producing and the industrial sector.
Excellent. Thanks. All right, I guess maybe Ambrose has the final question, as we're running out of time. Ambrose, in terms of the regulatory environment, you heard what Alan is suggesting he wants to see in the next 10 to 15 years. Any change you see necessary to the regulatory environment to enable these things, especially as it relates to technology and all? I expect smart homes will be here. We're going to be using more technology in our homes, etc. Any regulatory change that you foresee, Ambrose?
For me, the single most important one, and I believe Dr. Allen touched it a little, has to do with the rational use of energy at the point of use. When the Electricity Act was implemented back in 1992, the focus was on the supply side, the infrastructure, generators, networks, and so on. we live in a world now where technology shifts happen much more rapidly. And activities you do, whether it's lighting, whether it's motor loads, whether it's refrigeration, the technology is shifting rapidly. And you're now able to do these same activities much more efficiently using electricity. But the adoption, the uptake by consumers in Belize is too slow. There needs to be, the Electricity Act does make a provision for a role for the commission with respect to energy efficiency, but it was more like an afterthought in the law, and there really needs that aspect, the end use of electricity, in my view, needs to become more prominent. And I believe Dr. Len kind of touched it briefly when you were asking about how to decarbonize the economy. Efficient use of electricity has to be number one.
Yep. I agree.
In terms of the strengthening the legal and regulatory framework of the existing supply side infrastructure, there are some things we can do, but I don't know. I think one of them is, let me just make a statement here for people to understand how the law was, how Parliament, when it passed the law back in 1992, how they tried to balance autonomy. In effect, the PUC, when Parliament passed the law, they gave the PUC two specific independence, if you want to call it. They made sure that the PUC was able to finance its activities independent of the government didn't appropriate money. So the government can use appropriations and allocation of resources in terms of so the PUC has independence financially. The second thing too is that the law granted the PUC powers to make regulations, to make orders, to make decisions without any, except for regulations. There are certain regulations which requires the assent of the minister, and there are some regulations that the PUC has direct powers to make. All directives, all orders, the PUC alone makes those kinds of laws. So that's the autonomy granted the commission. Then the legislator was trying to balance where the PUC now had to just can't operate willy-nilly. It had to operate within the some kind of political accountability. And the legislature decided in its wisdom to do that in two ways. The law granted the minister the authority to make orders of a general nature only though. So the minister can't tell the PUC, do this, do this, do this. The minister can make an order telling the PUC, like what Dr. Alan was saying. The minister gave a directive to the commission. Tell me if generation from gaseous fuels makes sense for Belize, and if so, do an auction for it. So that's a general application. But the minister can go say, Jeffrey, build a power plant and with gas, and the minister can't do that. Anything he does must be for general application. So that's the way how the political people are able to influence how the commission operates. The second way the government is able to is policy by appointment. So the government gets to choose who sits on the commission. And by law, the commission has a term, and the law says the commissioners must have staggered terms.
Ambrose, you're making the case
that aspect of the law has not been completely complied with. And that has been an area that probably needs some clarification.
It sounds to me like you have enough power, Ambrose. You don't need any more. It sounds to me like you already have enough power. You don't need any more.
That's why I'm saying that
so I'm not sure what is it, where is your answer taking you? It sounds like you don't need...
Well, I think, as I said, there are certain things that can be... In other words, the law, in my view, is quite good.
Adequate.
But the way it's being implemented
All right, good. So that's execution. That's different.
There are some things you can do to make it more
Understood.
clear, so
All
that
right, understood.
these
Understood.
distinctions that I drew can be drawn more tightly. If you understand what I'm saying.
All right, I got you. Okay, thanks, Ambrose. Let me give CEO Alan the final word.
Well, Steve, thanks. I mean, I would just like once again to emphasize that the future is bright when it comes to the energy picture. Alan mentioned a few excellent points, even areas where we are off grid. We have been successful from Ambrose's tenure at the ministry some years ago in winning grants of about 35 million from the generosity of the European Union, another 7 or 8 million from the United Arab Emirates, another amount from the Taiwanese government and people to help train and build capacity in our own staff and our own engineers. We're developing solar off-grid systems for places where the main grid hasn't reached. And our own Belizeans have a remarkable capacity for ingenuity and for demonstrating their expertise to solve complex problems. It's all terribly impressive, really. Of course, we must continue to implement these opportunities and to make the most of these opportunities and to share our plans and communications as much as we can. And I think, Steve, that I must thank yourself and Colorblind Productions, because I think we have to do a lot more of this, a lot more of engaging the general public in what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what are the solutions that we can consider as a country to drive ourselves forward. Because again, as Alan and Jeffrey and Ambrose have all said, the price of energy, the availability of a steady and reliable supply is a critical component of our economic development, and one that we really cannot overlook.
Excellent. Thank you very much, CEO. And thank you, gentlemen, Jeffrey, Alan, Ambrose. I want to thank all of you. It was really a pleasure having you all, and it was really a pleasure interacting with the Belizean public. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for your listeners for bearing with us tonight.
All right, Ambrose. Now, Belize's basket of power supply has evolved over the years for the better, but we can concede that we are still not as self-reliant as we'd like to be. Importing power to meet our energy needs has meant higher power acquisition costs than we would prefer. So then, moving forward, stronger in electric power depends on a self-sufficient and resilient local power grid. As an environmentally responsible country, that also means a commitment to embracing green energy to ensure that our carbon footprint remains low. We are happy that we can boast that we are one of the leaders in our region where green energy is concerned. CEO Peter Allen spoke about Belize growing to 90 to 95% homegrown power with virtually 100% green energy. That's certainly exciting and promising news for our Belize. And even more exciting when we entertain the idea of becoming a net exporter of electricity, a 180-degree turnaround from our current position of being a net importer of electricity. The idea of power generation as an export industry is something we should be discussing in the same breath as agriculture and other services. We have the land mass available for installing elaborate solar farms or wind turbine cities. We have been enjoying reliable power generation from our riverways, and we are continuously benefiting from bioenergy power generation. Belizeans, the sky is certainly the limit for us. We are moving in the right direction where electric power generation is concerned, And just like a dynamo must keep moving to keep the lights on, our energy stakeholders must continue to venture beyond the comfort zone, and our investment in the enabling infrastructures must continue should we wish to enjoy a brighter, more resilient future. Tonight we had with us important stakeholders from the public sector, the private sector, and even from the regulators. We witnessed their passion and obvious expertise, and with that, I am comfortable with saying that a resilient future in electric power is right within our reach. We are poised to move forward stronger. Viewers, thank you for joining me tonight. You're encouraged to return for our COVID-19 Watch finale next Monday, July 27th. We'll air right here on Channel 7 or on Facebook at 8 p.m. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your night and the weekend. Take care.